Hey everyone, welcome to this season launch webinar. There's a lot we have to go through today, so I hope you're all very nice and comfortable back home. If not quite yet, now's the time to go get a cup of water, a cup of coffee, pen and a paper to just write everything down. I think we should give people a few minutes, just a few stragglers to join, and then we can just start.
Yeah, I see already a lot of people sign up. We have over 200 registrants for today's webinar. And this will mark our 27-28 season launch, which was officially launched 2 weeks ago during October 14th. Actually, make it 3 weeks, right, Rafa?
Yep, it's been a while. So we're pretty excited to get all this knowledge into people's heads. There's already a lot of interest. And with a new season, there's always new things to look into. So, we can tackle some of those questions head on.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we go ahead and share our housekeeping rules before we get going?
Yeah, of course, there's a few things that are important for everybody to know. The main things, I think, have to do with the chat box and the Q&A box that you can see in the webinar bar at the bottom. So any specific questions you want us to address, go in the Q&A box. And then the chat box is for just a bit more casual talking. Those Q&A questions, we'll try to get to them by the end of the webinar. So if you ask something that we haven't gone through, stick in the webinar until the end. And there might be some things that we're able to answer on the spot as well. So if you have a question in mind, best to write it down. We might be able to answer it in the context of what we're talking about. So, we're going to start things off with a quick poll. If, just some quick information to know what people are interested in, people are more anxious to know about, which will help us kind of know what to focus on most. So I'm going to answer it myself over here as well.
And will people go ahead and give us their answers? What about the follow-up email with the recording? You registered, but you couldn't attend, or you have to leave and you don't want to miss out on the whole webinar. What's up with that?
Yeah, everybody's got a busy day, so if you need to go ahead somewhere else, as long as you signed up, you're going to get the recording of the webinar. If you know somebody who's interested, you can also send it to them later on. So yeah, you can count on the recording being sent, and if we missed some answers in the Q&A box, we're going to try to address as many of them as possible in that follow-up email. There's sometimes a lot of them. We'll try to go through the ones that cover as much as possible, answering the highest amount as we can.
Amazing. All right, so why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves? You might be familiar with us. But myself, I'm Renato Marin. I'm the sales manager for direct sales here at Antarctica 21. I've been working for the company for almost 6 years. And with me today, as usual, Rafa, I think you can take it away.
Yep, I'm the little head in the chat box in the website, so you might have seen me before, plus signing at the bottom of the newsletters that go out. It's been 4 years almost for me working with Antarctica 21, so now I can very confidently talk about everything that we do. It's a lot of information and a very specific way of operating, so getting your information from the right source is really important. I'm very passionate about what we do, so I'm always excited to answer a lot of questions. I'm your contact before and after this trip starts, along with the team. So, we're always going to be very easy to find.
All right. So, as we said, this is a webinar about the 27-28 season launch, and you might already be familiar with us, by being in touch with us, by having visited our website. But for the benefit of those of you who might not be familiar with us, we'll go ahead and explain a little bit of what we do as Antarctica 21 and what stands out, why we stand out in comparison to other companies that do air cruises or fly and sail cruises.
Exactly.
So that is basically skipping the Drake Passage and exploring the seventh continent, with which I'll let you just go deeper into that, Rafa. Sorry for that hiccup there.
No worries.
We're just waiting on the slide change.
So there are a few different ways to get to Antarctica. You know, there are a lot of different travelers. I'm sure there's a lot of different people in this webinar. But one thing in common is that everybody wants to go to Antarctica. The option that most people are going to end up going for is crossing the Drake Passage. It's the one that's most well known. Of course, it's been the classic way to get there. There wasn't always a runway in Antarctica, so 90-something% of people are going to be facing the Drake Passage. Now, what does it mean? Some people might consider it like a short crossing, getting to an island that can be pretty close by, but it's not really the case. The Drake Passage crosses the Antarctic
the Southern Ocean.
Southern Ocean, which is pretty infamous for being the roughest ocean in the world. It's 2 days crossing, potentially more than 50 hours crossing, depending on the weather. There's always chances of heavy storms being in the region that we're focusing on. And with that, there's always the potential for seasickness, discomfort. We've seen some cases in which people get injured because of the movement of the ship. It can be quite dangerous sometimes. It is for some people. I had the pleasure or displeasure of doing the Drake Passage. It's fun for the first 15 minutes, but then you realize you have 47 hours and 45 minutes to go, and it gets old pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very adventurous option, maybe a bit too much, but I think it was important within the industry to be able to present an alternative. The minimum amount of people actually deal well with rough seas. So Antarctic 21 comes into the industry with this breakthrough idea of the Antarctica Air-Cruise. It's been about 23 years, I think, something like that.
Exactly. We're on to 23 years.
Since Antarctica 21 started operating. So it's been quite a while, and there are a few benefits. There's the obvious ones after those videos we saw on the last slide. But it's a very comfortable experience. It's a very classic plane, the one that goes through these flights. It's very well equipped for the terrain that it's landing in, but the interior feels surprisingly like the flight you might take from Miami to New York, maybe just a bit smaller. It's very fast, especially compared with sailing. It's just a 2-hour flight compared to those 2 days on the Drake Passage. So it takes advantage of everybody's time really well. We all wish we had infinite vacation days to dedicate to something like this. So even if you want to do the Drake Passage, maybe you don't even have the time to do the Drake Passage. You want to spend that time actually in Antarctica experiencing everything that there is to see there, which we'll see later, and it's maybe way too much. And then the other thing that comes to the Antarctica Air-Cruise is, since they're not huge planes, it's a very exclusive experience. Like I said before, 90-something% of people across the Drake sailing. With small planes, you have to have small ships. So it lends itself really well for a more boutique, personalized experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think besides, being a speedy alternative to crossing the Drake, it's important for a lot of people is that once you arrive to Antarctica by plane, you're fresh as a cucumber. You've spent a pre-night in Punta Arenas. You haven't been braving rough seas for a couple of days without sleeping. So the end result is that you arrive there fresh and full of energy to actually spend 2 hours and a half, 3 hours during the morning, during the afternoon exploring, instead of just wanting to go back home after crossing the Drake.
I think it's a pretty common thread throughout the way we operate. We provide a lot of comfort, but that's all there. The purpose behind that comfort is for you to be well rested, to really tire everybody out during the day and spend as much time off the ship. Because of the size of the ship we have, we only need one flight to operate these air cruises, which is just a huge advantage when it comes to maximize the chances of being able to fly out when we want to, which we know can be a big concern for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. So, Rafa, you mentioned that we've been doing this for 23 years. Of course, we are the pioneers of the air cruise model. Nowadays, there are other companies that also provide air cruises or fly and sail, like it's also called. But it's not quite the same, is it? What still stands Antarctica 21 out from all those competitors?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely a few things. So we're going to go one by one to be able to give each of them the attention they deserve, because I think each of these can really make or break the Antarctic experience. So I think the first one mentioned here is that we are 100% focused on this type of operating. Like I said before, it's a very specific way of operating in a very special region. So to be experts in what we're doing, not being distracted by other ways of traveling and other destinations is a huge benefit when it comes to knowing where we are, what we need to do, being ready for every single scenario. Other companies fly or have cruises to a lot of other places in the world, which I think is incredible. I'd love to go to every single one of them. But a place like Antarctica deserves very specific focus, and for us year-round is only planning these flights this season, this way of operating. So when it comes, we're 100% ready. It's all about being ready for that season. Then the second one has to do with the Antarctic Flight Advantage. Of all these different companies that are now doing air cruises, which are 5, I think, by now, we're the only ones that only need one flight to get everybody to and from Antarctica. In a place where weather windows can be short and quick and maybe far in between sometimes, if you only have time for one flight to make it out of Punta Arenas to get to Antarctica, same thing on the way back, get back to Punta Arenas, it's going to make sense to operate that company that with only one flight you're covered, everybody's back home instead of splitting up the group.
Mm-hmm. There was someone asking about statistics, and sure, that's normally a very recurring question and one that we normally include in our follow-up emails. But roughly speaking, 80% of our flights leave on the scheduled day, so that gives us a very high success rate for the same reason that you just mentioned, Rafa. We only need one flight to get everyone to King George Island, where our ship is waiting for you. So yeah, definitely a very strong advantage.
Then I kind of spoke about this before as well, being a small scale operating company. At most, our air cruises are going to have 76 people on board. So keeping a group small and also having a lot of guides to guide that group allows us to be able to very personally attend everybody's needs. I'm a bit of a nature nerd, and I'm sure everybody that wants to go to Antarctica is as well. So you're going to have a lot of questions. You're going to be extremely curious. To be able to have somebody who is able to answer your question really quick and isn't attending 10 other people's questions is really incredible. You get to meet these incredible people a lot more one-on-one. So, you get to learn a lot from them. Their experiences are incredible. That option to keep things kind of familiar, I think, operating a bit like a family when you're down there is a huge up in the atmosphere that we have on board.
So that would be a high guest to staff ratio, which would make things intimate for our guests, right?
Yep. I think it's like a guy every 12 guests on board. So, we could have more people on board any of these trips, but we don't want to need more than one flight, and also we don't want to have more people than we can consciously give a personalized experience.
What about the limit of guests that can disembark at any given time in Antarctica according to regulations that are in place for touristic operators like ourselves?
So as per Antarctic regulations, Antarctica, of course, being a very fragile region, is a very regulated place. You can't disembark 100 people at the same time. So if you're going on a ship that has more than 100 guests, then you're definitely going to need to take turns to be able to get off the ship. For us, that time we're spending it at each landing sites, it's not split between the people we have on board. Everybody can get off the ship all together. Everybody can stay until the very end of the day on that landing site and go back to the ship if they're ready to rest. And if they're done, they feel like they've seen everything before the amount of time we're going to be spending that area is done, it's really easy to find an expedition guide. They'll be able to get you a Zodiac and get you back on the ship. Having less than 100 guests opens up a ton of option, and it opens up a ton of time. When I say it opens up options, I mean that it literally, if you have less than 100 guests on a ship, then you have more areas, more sites that you can land in Antarctica. Weather is very unpredictable, so having a lot of options is a huge advantage.
And also not having to operate on the rotation scheme into a turn scheme that ships with more than 100 guests would have to resort to is a huge benefit for our experience.
I've spoken with people that have gone on other ships or that have worked on other ships, and they say that after a while, they start getting kind of hurried to get off the ship. And if you don't feel like you've spent enough time in that area, that can just be a huge bummer, at least for people like me. Then what's become a pretty huge differentiator for Antarctica 21 is the fact that we have Explorer's House, so you can see in those images right there. It's this exclusive club, you could say, in Antarctica 21, used only by people going on our air cruises. So this venue allows us to host the boot fitting, the welcome drink, the welcome dinner, the security, the briefing that we need to have before we actually get people to Antarctica. We have a dedicated space in which we can have it. We've spoken a bit about the flights. Those flights can be delayed. Having Explorer's House, when you have a group of 76 people in a place like Punta Arenas, it's not easy to find a place where you can just smush 76 people or more, at the bottom of the world in Patagonia. So to have Explorer's House opens up a lot of options. And I think it's worth also squeezing in here because it has to do with the flights we said before. A flight disruption isn't always a delay. We get people together in Explorer's House. If we see some bad weather on the day we're supposed to be flying out on day 2, we can push the flight to day 1. So 80% of flights leave on the day they're supposed to. That 20% aren't only delays, they're also the flight being pushed forward, which, if you ask me, more time in Antarctica, that's definitely great news. Explorer's House has been a game changer. The way we used to do it as a company that didn't have a specific venue in Punta Arenas, you just have to kind of make do with what you have and use a conference space, for example, in one of the hotels in Punta Arenas, kind of with the booths and their own racks that you put in a few hours before. So this allows us to be incredibly prepared to have the groups that we have and actually have the trip start before you even get on the plane to Antarctica. As you can see in these images, Explorer's House is an experience in of itself. It has a gift shop, it has a ton of books. You get to meet the people there already instead of being in a hotel room. So I was a bit of a skeptic at first with Explorer's House. It's just this huge project. I wasn't sure if we were going to get enough use out of it, but it has been an incredible addition to our service.
Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, Rafa, this is where the trip actually starts. You don't have to wait until you board the ship to feel like your trip has already started. There are common elements in design of the ships and Explorer's House which are intentional, so that people, when they make it to the ship, they recognize the colors, the materials, elements like the iceberg reception at both Explorer's House or any of the 2 ships, which just make you feel like your adventure has already started.
Yeah, the visual language was, like Ronaldo said, purposely brought from the ship with the same interior designer into Explorer's House. So, people love our ships. It's great to have them have kind of the same experience, the same standard before they actually get to the ship. And then it also has to do with being able to have a venue like that in Punta Arenas. The reason we're able to do that is because we're locals in Punta Arenas. Thus, the company's roots are all set in Punta Arenas. The founders are from Punta Arenas. The biggest office we have, our main office, is in Punta Arenas as well. Me and Ronaldo work from here in Santiago, from the Santiago office. But, Chile and I've gone to Patagonia a billion times. To see something like Explorer's House in Punta Arenas blew my mind. And with a whole team that's actually from the area that you are traveling to, you can have very well thought out recommendations when it comes to where to have dinner. Today I spoke with somebody who needed some dinner recommendations for Punta Arenas. In the case where we do have these delays, to have people that are actually from there and know the different operators and the different services that you can go for in Punta Arenas allows us to be able to quickly adapt and find an activity that we can do the whole group together. Punta Arenas, fortunately, it's an incredible place to wait for a flight. It's in the middle of Patagonia. So if there's one of those delays, we're not going to be wasting anybody's time. We're going to be having activities, going to one of these beautiful areas around Punta Arenas, and also hanging around in Explorer's House. You won't necessarily have to find a different restaurant to eat in every single extra day you might have to Punta Arenas. In the odd case, that does happen.
That's true. Well, and I think to wrap this up, and with the new ship, it has become, I mean, and this started way before the Magellan Discovery was built, or started to be built, and that's making our expeditions and our company as sustainable as possible. So what would you highlight in this regard?
Yeah, I think it's, we were talking about it at the office the other day. It's really exciting to be in a company that puts sustainability into all the big decisions they're making. I think the launch of the Magellan Discoverer marks a huge precedent for the industry. It's the first hybrid electric cruise built in the Americas. It's incredibly state-of-the-art, and the decisions were taken with sustainability in mind. Explorer's House is powered by solar panels. The Zodiacs in Antarctica are used with this e-fuel, which is a bit of a tricky word to use because it can be used a bit deceptively sometimes. In this case, it's fuel that has been collected capturing
like pollution?
Yeah,
Right?
capturing pollution, and we get this e-fuel that's used for the starting at the beginning of last season on these Zodiacs. And it's something we hope to be able to adapt on the different motorized things we have in Antarctica. Being from Punta Arenas, I think keeping those roots alive can be very significant to the people that work in the company and for people that travel as well. So Antarctica 21 has the Antarctica 21 Foundation. There's a lot of different projects that they work on, and from the operational side, we can help a ton with that as well. Just helping research, getting different people that are doing different types of research on board, and kind of being an instrument to help forward innovation.
Exactly. Punta Arenas is a hub not only for Antarctic tourism, as one of the gateways to Antarctica, like Ushuaia, Cape Town, Christchurch, Hobart, etc., but also is home to a lot of Antarctic missions. So being able to harness that interest in our own case with the Antarctica 21 Foundation, and give the opportunity to those institutions to get involved with projects, it's an amazing opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's not even getting into biosecurity. The things that you definitely have to do, the biosecurity protocols, all the IATO restrictions, that those are the base, and from there we build on up. We don't just do the minimal, which is something very exciting.
Exactly. So with that clear, now we go into our 27-28 Antarctic Air-Cruises. And this season, Raf, it's of course one for the books, because we will be offering 45 departures across these 4 Air-Cruise itineraries. So if I'm not wrong, it's going to be 39 classic Antarctica trips, 2 Polar Circle trips, 2 Antarctica and South Georgia trips, and 2 Antarctica Express trips. Mm-hmm. Mind that some of these might be charter or have big groups, so you might not find them available on our website, but that's the offer that we're going with.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think it's really good to have an option for everybody. Sometimes people get on a video call with me and they say, well, what do you recommend? And I don't know what you want. I have my favorite, the Polar Circle, but different people have different interests. So all of these have been thought out throughout the years to be able to appeal to different types of travelers. And we'll go into what trip for what type of person will be as we get into the specifics of each of these itineraries.
And well, there is a reason why we have 39 classic Antarctica trips, right?
Yeah, for sure. So the classic is by far, and that's why we start with this one every time, the one we do most every season. It's the most popular one by far. I can bet 90% of people booked in this webinar will end up going on the Classic. So I recommend paying a bit more attention to this one, because usually after a few questions, we end up landing on that this might be the best choice. It's 8 days and 7 nights total. You have to keep in mind that only 5 of those nights are on board. I say only, but 5 nights on board is really plenty. That gives you 4 full days of excursions. We'll go into what a typical day in Antarctica looks like in a bit, but it's 4 full days of being able to wake up and fall asleep in Antarctica. And every single one of those days, we pack as much as we can of Antarctica into every person's experience. As much as we're incredibly proud of these 2 vessels, for us they're just, I think, these incredible tools that we need to be able to get people comfortably to these incredible places. Get the best sleep that you can, but then when you wake up, spend as much time off the ship as you can.
And you said it's 5 days on the ship, so that means that there's 2 additional days where we have the pre-night and post-night, which are not, it's not random that we include those, and that the purpose behind that is that people have a buffer between arriving to Punta Arenas, being able to have a flight window, and then making this itinerary viable operationally, right?
Yep. So I mentioned before the possibility of the flight being pushed forward. That's the reason why we have that first night spent in Punta Arenas. That lets us adapt. If we see some bad weather for day 2 and we're supposed to fly out, we can just push the flight forward and everybody's already going to be there. Same thing on the way back, and I'm focusing on this because it applies to all these air cruises. If on the way back we can't fly back to Punta Arenas the day we're supposed to, no big deal. Everybody's planning to stay 1 night in Punta Arenas on the way back as a built-in buffer. We always recommend adding a bit more, but having it built in those 2 nights is crucial for a smooth season and also a smooth travel experience for all of you that are looking to go on this trip.
Exactly. So you did mention that the Polar Circle Air-Cruise was your favorite.
Yeah,
What does it entail?
So, to me, what makes it my favorite is just more time in Antarctica. After 4 years, I don't think I've seen more than 3 people go back for a second trip to Antarctica. I doubt a lot of people go back more than once to Antarctica, so the more time you can spend there, the better. Those 2 extra days, the reason for them existing is trying to go further south in an attempt to reach the Antarctic Polar Circle, which is incredible. This bucket list item for a lot of people. I know a lot of people before this trip has gone to the Arctic, so it's something they definitely want to pin down. I think that's incredible. But to me, it's all about more time in Antarctica. I have a 30-day Polar Circle air cruise if I could. And then the rest of the trip's structure is exactly the same as the classic air cruise. So, apart from 2 extra nights, an attempt to reach the Antarctic Polar Circle, there's not much I can add when compared to what I spoke before. But yeah, the more ice you can see, the better.
Exactly.
And then there's this other very beautiful air cruise, which is the longest one we have. Like Renato said, we're going to have 2 of these, the 27-28 season. It combines these 2 incredibly wild destinations. Everybody here, I'm certain, has heard of Antarctica, but maybe not everybody has heard of South Georgia. It's this sub-Antarctic island that's kind of in between the bottom tip of South America and Cape Town, maybe a bit further south, and it's one of the most incredible wildlife spectacles you can find, as you can see in that picture. That's literally just a very small sample of the amount of penguins that you can see in South Georgia. So the specific penguins you see most in South Georgia that you don't really see in Antarctica are the king penguins. St. Andrews Bay is famous for having these 500,000 penguins in the same bay. It takes your breath away and it smells incredible. It smells like penguin. So to be able to combine both these places in one go is absolutely incredible. You do have to consider that the distances can be a bit vast and that you're definitely going to have to have spent some time at sea getting from A to B and then to C on this one. There's no flights to South Georgia. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you can manage that amount of days and at least South Georgia brings a bit of curiosity delve into this one, it's mind-blowing.
So it's a good point to bring up that this trip involves a bit of sailing. And there was a question about flights being involved in this itinerary, which of course there is, as it is an air cruise. It's just not flying both ways. So it starts in Ushuaia, it sails through the southern sea to South Georgia, and then it goes to the South Shetland Islands and the surroundings of the Antarctic Peninsula, and then you go back to King George and you fly it as you would from either a classic or a polar circle.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that's the correct way of the right direction to go when doing this air cruise. Having the flight at the end after having already had this huge adventure, you're going to be pretty tired. So having that flight be at the end of the trip instead of at the beginning is just a huge relief, I think, to be able to get back to the hotel, sleep in a bed that isn't moving around, and get some proper rest and head back home. It's the more adventurous option, I think, this one.
For sure. And last but not least, the Antarctica Express.
Yeah, the Antarctica Express is a lot of people's favorites. I think the main thing about it is that it's probably the best introduction to Antarctica that you can have, keeping everything affordable and also having that air cruise element to it. So the way this one works is it starts in Ushuaia in Argentina, and you start sailing south, so you get a bit of the bottom tip of South America, that part of Patagonia that are just these beautiful islands, and then you do the Drake Passage until you get to Antarctica. I think it's a really good option for those that are adventurous as well. It's kind of a bit more the backpacker option. There's really not any backpackers that go on this one because they're still very, maybe not backpacker priced, but kind of more adventurous type of person. Then you cross the Drake Passage, spend about 24 hours in Antarctica, specifically in the South Shetland Islands, and then you fly back. When it comes to the South Shetlands, a lot of people, when I talk to them, they'll say, you know what, I'm not interested. I definitely want to go all the way down and to the peninsula and spend a lot of time exploring the peninsula. The other options aren't within their rate, but this one isn't quite their cup of tea either because of that, because it's only the South Shetlands. But don't sleep on it, because the South Shetlands have some of the cooler areas that you can see in the whole of Antarctica, I think. Deception Island is beautiful. There's this island, I forget what it's called, that has these huge basaltic columns. I think the volcanic origin of the region is very noticeable in that part. The geology is incredible. You also have these abandoned whaling stations that I think are much more common to see on the Express and on the other Antarctica cruises. So great introduction, more affordable option for a lot of people, and to explore the Shetlands is an opportunity not to be dismissed at all.
Mm-hmm. And bucket list for those of you brave enough to try and cross the Drake Passage, of course.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that either really want to do the Drake Passage or just want to set foot in Antarctica and fly back. When you touch the South Shetland Islands, you've been to Antarctica. It's like if you've been to Sicily, you've been to Italy type of thing. If you've been to Hawaii, you've been to the US. It's Antarctica, just not the continental part of Antarctica.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's also a highlight of this itinerary is that the variety of seabirds that you see during the crossing of the Antarctic convergence as you approach the South Shetland Islands, like the giant petrels and black brow albatross or other type of albatrosses. For those of you who are birders, it's just sometimes not available on the peninsula, which of course depends on your focus and on your motivations.
Yeah, these seabirds are always trailing the ships, so a really good opportunity. I love photography, and it's probably the best opportunity to get a good shot of an albatross since they're trailing the ship all the time, and you kind of learn the movement a bit and get a good shot of them.
Exactly. So now that we've covered the itineraries, a recurring question for people that are inquiring into a Antarctic trip is, what does a typical day in Antarctica look like? And I guess the real answer is that there's no typical day, right?
Right.
But
yeah. I mean, that's what makes it exciting. It's an adventure, and it's Antarctica. The structure of the day is going to be pretty much what we're going to go through here. But the good thing about Antarctica, sometimes people say, I want a specific itinerary. I want to know where I'm going to be every single day. But we don't even know where we're going to be every single day. Not even maybe the day before we're having each activity. The weather changes all the time. If we have a set itinerary, we might end up going to this place that is beautiful, but in bad conditions, it's going to be just a bad time. So to be able to adapt, I think, is a superpower in Antarctica. If you zoom in on Google Earth to the Antarctic Peninsula, you'll see all these bays are pointing in different directions. So even when the whole peninsula is going through a wind spell, let's say, it gives us a lot of options to find an area that's well sheltered from the wind. So you can always rest assured that wherever you are in Antarctica during these trips, it's going to be the best possible option given the conditions that we get during that trip. These trips are also pretty tiring. Not necessarily, but I think we're going to want to tire people as much as we can get them to want to be tired out. Like I said, the ship is this incredible, beautiful tool to get incredible rest and then spend as much time on the ship. So that's going to be our focus. So with that said, if you want to spend more time on the ship, no problem at all. It's a great place to spend the day. So the day is going to start relatively early, depending on who you ask. Maybe 7, 8 a.m. breakfast buffet. So classic buffet, just getting what you want. We always go for a big breakfast in Antarctica because that's energy we're going to need for the day. As soon as we're done with the breakfast, you have to go get ready for the first excursion of the day. We aim at having 2, and each of them last on average 2.5 hours. So you're gonna want to have a big meal to start the day. So for those first 2.5 hours, you have a lot of energy to spend. So the way these excursions are planned out, they're going to change depending on where we are. But let's say most times, maybe 85% of times, it's going to be a land excursion. So we're going to be getting on the Zodiacs, using them to get to the shore. If there's anything interesting in the way, we're going to go check it out. But we're getting to the shore, and when you get to the shore, the expedition team will have arrived in that area before everybody else. Before everybody else, and they're going to have marked an area with red flags where you can just walk along at your own pace. So when I say we want to tire people out, you can walk as much as you want, but we're going to give you this canvas through the one you can walk as much as you really want. Some people go very fast. I'm a bit intense. I end up going a bit fast. I was able to do this trip with my dad. He took it a bit slower, which I think ended up being the way to go. You're going to want to take it nice and slow. But the good thing about this is that pretty often you're going to look around and it's just going to be you and the landscape. It's already a small ship. We're going to be in a big landing site, and with everybody moving at their own pace, it's very often that you look around and it's completely silent, or you can just hear penguins or ice cracking, and it's beautiful. So these landing sites feature a high point you can walk to get a nice 360 view. Sometimes there's scientific stations in the area so we can disembark in. Abandoned whaling stations are one of the more interesting things you can see in Antarctica. I love the history behind them and kind of the recovery story for the wildlife post the whaling. Other times, it's going to be an icier, flatter landscape. In other areas, just because of the shape of the bay, it's just going to pile up a lot of icebergs, and to get to a high point and see the ship surrounded by icebergs is just mind-blowing, and you truly feel like a very wild adventurer. Then there's going to be other occasions where instead of going on land, the best thing to do is going to be being on the water. We have plenty of Zodiacs for everybody to be very comfortable in the Zodiacs, and we're going to be sailing around looking, if we know there are whales nearby. These areas with icebergs are beautiful to just travel around in a Zodiac. Every Zodiac has its guide, and they're going to be answering questions, just telling you what to look out for, because in a place like this, it's so foreign to what you see normally. Having somebody to tell you what to keep an eye for, answer questions, and kind of explain behind the scenes about what you're seeing is just a huge advantage. After about 2.5 hours of that, we go back on board for lunch. Lunch is buffet style, just like breakfast, so you can just get what you want. Again, hopefully fueling up as much as possible. The food on board has gotten really incredible. I was able to be on board a few years ago, and it was already really good. And then last time I was on board, I was just mind blown. I'm a bit of a picky eater, so maybe I'm just easily impressed, but I think everybody on board was on board with the food as well. Then after lunch, there's usually enough time for a bit of a power nap, get some rest, because not long after that, we're going off the ship for the second excursion of the day. Same thing as I mentioned before, only in the afternoon. When you get back on the ship for lunch, immediately we start moving to a different spot. It's always a similar concept of the place, but wildly different. It's like, a grander version of the Grand Canyon where, it's always a canyon, but depending on where you are, it's going to look completely different. And the time of day also changes everything. The animal species that you see, the penguin colonies, usually at every landing site, in my experience, you have a bit of a penguin colony or sometimes these larger penguin colonies. So same thing in the afternoon. When we're done with that second excursion of the day, we go back on board, have usually sometimes dress down, get off all that heavy gear, and we have one of the main lectures of the day, which usually has to do with something we saw that day. If we saw a whale species that's specifically interesting, then the whale expert is going to be giving us a lecture on what makes that whale interesting. Whales, always amazing, or what's going on with the ice, the krill, the penguins. It's always incredible. I never miss a single one of these lectures, and I hope you don't either. And then after that, kind of more scientific lecture, there's a bit more of a bar talk at the lounge, and we'll also be given a bit of a shorter lecture by the expedition team leader about what we're most likely to be doing the next day, just to prepare you for what's to come. Then after that, we're offered dinner, which is à la carte. There's going to be different options to change every day, and they're going to bring them to the table. And then after dinner, people are usually off to bed pretty early. Maybe they'll have a drink or something, but it's far from a booze cruise. We want to get a lot of rest to kick the day off early the next day.
Correct. So to sum it up, there are 2 excursions per day, and whatever we have planned for that day will depend ultimately on what the weather is doing and what it allows us to do on that given day. And if not, we'll have plan B, C, D, E until there's something that we can actually do, right?
Mm-hmm. The priority is always have these people have these incredible experiences, and also spend a lot of time actually having excursions.
It's important to know that there is no trip like the one before. Everyone's special, and your expectations should be set on what the continent has to offer, and expecting to be surprised and not have a fixed idea of what you want to experience.
Exactly.
All right, so I saw some people asking about activities like snowshoeing and sea kayaking, and we're right on time. So besides what you just mentioned, Rafa, which are the including landings and disembarkations, which are 2 per day, we'll try to do 2 per day, always, like I said, weather dependent. We have activities that are additional, like sea kayaking, snowshoeing. So why don't we go with hiking, snowshoeing first?
Mm-hmm. So there's a really good amount of hiking, I'd say, done already in these included excursions that we have. But for those people that want to challenge themselves more, they're usual hikers back home, and they want to get a higher view, hiking and snowshoeing is an incredible option. This one is booked on board, so the way it works, the expedition team member in charge of the activity is going to let people know what the opportunity is going to be for the next day. So if it sounds like something you're interested in, like it's going to be good for your fitness level, then you can just sign up. If not, you can just stick to the rest of the team. The higher you get in Antarctica, the better perspective you get on the size of everything. So if you're up for it, definitely go for it. It's a really good way to enrich the experience.
And we then have sea kayaking, which is very popular. And what is the difference in the terms of booking this activity when you convert it to hiking and snowshoeing?
Yeah, so sea kayaking has to be booked when you book the trip. It has very limited availability, just the amount of kayaks we can have on board and the groups we can manage. And it's a very high demand activity. So when you ask for availability for cabins also ask for the availability for sea kayaking if it's something you're interested in as well. There's 2 alternating groups of 10 kayakers. So, if the weather's cooperating, then one will go in the morning, then the other one will go in the afternoon. Same thing on the next day. When the weather permits, we're going to be going out, and these 2 groups of 10 people are going to be taking turns. I think it's a really good way to enrich the experience. I mean, the photos kind of speak for themselves. But I think what doesn't come through in the photos is the silence, the temperature of the water, like being that close to the cold water is very exhilarating and also extremely peaceful. Like you can see, those conditions are completely flat. If it's not safe for kayaking, then we're not going to be kayaking. You need to have some experience sea kayaking, but these are the conditions we're going to be aiming at for this activity.
Something that people always ask when they're interested about sea kayaking is how is this activity going to affect their, the rest of their experience?
Mm-hmm. So the way it's operated to not have sea kayakers miss out on the main activities or have people that aren't on sea kayaking feel like other people are sea kayaking while they're just waiting around to have any activity, we operate this activity to avoid that situation. Nobody's waiting around for anybody, and nobody's going to be missing out on anything. The kayakers start their excursion half an hour before everybody else. So while you're having breakfast, kayakers might be gearing up to go on this activity. And then the kayaking activity lasts for an hour and a half. Once they're done, they're going to join the rest of the group at the landing site. So kayakers aren't going to be missing out on this excursion site, but they're packing a bit more into the day. It's a really good way to enhance the experience. But as somebody who loves kayaking, if you feel like you have enough to do in the day, you don't need to have it, but it's a definite nice, very, very nice to have.
Exactly. I know that for some people it might feel like a deal breaker, but it shouldn't necessarily be that. Like you're saying, the trip as it is has enough activities and intensity so that you don't feel like you're missing out if all the kayaking spots were already booked or sold out.
Yep.
All right. So another element of what make our experience special is science and all that surrounds that on board of the ship. What can you tell us about what we do and what we're involved with at Antarctica 21?
Yeah, I think there's different initiatives that bring science on board the ship. I think the one people are most interested in are the citizen science programs that we have, where the guests are able to participate in science. I think a pretty classic one is bringing some samples from the ocean, looking at them under a microscope, see if there's anything surprising in there. I was able to do something like this on a whaling trip near the Atacama Desert. And the stuff you see through the microscope that's in the water, it's incredible. It's kind of its own little ecosystem. So very interesting. You get to learn a lot about the food chain in Antarctica. It all starts in these small particles. There are also programs in which you do some bird sighting to count species, work with apps like eBird or Happy Whale, pretty popular. And then there's also the way we bring science on board via the Antarctic 21 Foundation. So sponsoring people to have them on board to be able to carry out experiences that will be able to back up important research that's going to be relevant towards the rest of the world. And then, we kind of went through the lectures before. A21 Connection. A21 Connect is all about education and kind of not just showing people pretty and cute penguins, but also learning a lot about these penguins, what their year looks like. They're not spending the whole season on the ice in Antarctica. So, a lot of people have a lot of questions. Where do they go? Where do they spend the rest of the year? Same thing with whales. The geology, the glaciology of Antarctica is just this incredible world. If you love a nature documentary, these lectures are just mind-blowing. So we try to have one per day, like I said before, kind of delving deeper into what we saw that day. So if you go on board, don't miss any of them. Sometimes a topic you'll think will be very boring will surprise you, with the expedition team being incredibly enthusiastic about something that seems very boring at first, you'll become the number one fan of Lycan, for example. It can be the most exciting topic when you deal with these passionate people that know what they're talking about.
Exactly. I think just hearing this from experts that know how to present this information helps to give you perspective of what you're seeing, what you're experiencing in these trips, and enriches ultimately your Antarctic trip. All right, so we're getting close to the end, but I think we've saved the best for last. As some of you know, as of 2026, 2027 season, we will be operating the Magellan Discoverer, which is a sister ship of the Magellan Explorer, our first purposely built expedition vessel. And like Rafa mentioned before, this is the first hybrid electric ship built in the Americas. It's been built here at Asenaf Shipyards in Valdivia, which is located in southern Chile. And actually, its launching ceremony just happened sorry, I might have skipped that slide. Or let's just go there.
I think it's a
and
bit further there.
Exactly. So this happened a couple of weeks ago, and it was a success. Memorable moment, very emotional moment for everyone involved in the project, and also for everyone that works at Antarctica 21. It looks a bit weird because it's missing the bridge, the wraparound deck, and some other elements that give the ship its nature and feel. But yeah, so I know that people were looking forward to this because there's always that what if, when is the ship going to be delivered?
Right.
When is it going to start its operations and all those questions?
So fortunately, it didn't sink, and it was looking incredibly strong. And it's actually, this was last week or the week before that, and it's already looking a lot different. The bridge, I think, was already installed, or at least presented on top of the ship. Everything that's left to do is going to be done in the water, so it's moving along really nicely.
So construction started on February 2024, and the ship will be delivered next year in September. And so for those of you who would want to take a closer look, this is what it will look like. And general information, when people ask us what's different about the ship than the Magellan, in summary, bigger cabins, all cabins have balconies. It's just a elevated experience from what we have in the Magellan, not taking anything away from the Magellan Explorer, because it has shared elements, of course, like that reception that you saw there. The science lab, of course, I think it's one of the key takeaways for this new ship, and the sauna with these incredible views. We also already had a gym at the Magellan Explorer, but I think this is just going to make it, even better if you can imagine something like that.
Yeah, we were talking about a good way of comparing them is kind of going through the iPhone 17 Ultra Plus just came out, and immediately all phones before that are kind of outdated. But as soon as the iPhone 18 Mega Plus comes out, the iPhone 17 Mega Plus is going to seem outdated, even though it's almost exactly the same machine with very similar capabilities. When it comes to these ships, the Magellan Discoverer brings the advancements that the industry has been having the last 6 years since the launch of the Magellan Explorer, which are some pretty significant leaps. But if you look at the Magellan Explorer without having seen the Magellan Discoverer before, it's just this incredibly top-of-the-line ship. Even with the Magellan Discoverer, it's a leader in the segment. So, I've seen some people kind of start treating the Magellan Explorer like it's an old ship now that this new one comes out, but it's top of the line. It has, I think, a lot of the changes in the guts of the ship, for example. It's incredibly modern, but then the Magellan Explorer is incredibly modern as well. It was already ahead of its time when it was launched, so it does not at all seem up to date. I think that when you see both ships and see how similar they are, you can tell just how ahead of its time the Magellan Explorer was back in 2019, which wasn't long ago at all.
Exactly. And I think the really the highlights of the ship, it's the hybrid electric propulsion system that's going to allow us to save the use of fuel, so the carbon footprint is lower, and also the azipods, which are gonna they rotate 360 degrees, so that makes for smoother sailing and less disruption because of less noise to the wildlife, and also reduce use of fuel, and then a system that reuses the residual heat from the engines to power the heating and the water of the ship. So all these elements just add to our sustainability purpose at Antarctica 21, and are going to help us position as a leader in both Antarctic Air-Cruises and being a sustainable travel company. All right, so like Rafa mentioned, the Magellan Explorer, here you have it. And I think the Discover, when the bridge is installed and everything is completed, will look very similar, albeit a little bit bigger. And it was launched in 2019. It has amazing top to bottom windows. All cabins have balconies, but the portholes. It's home away from home. It already also has a sauna and a gym. And there's a lounge where, like Rafa was saying, is where you will be spending most of your time outside of eating and being outside. And yeah, those are our ships. As you already know, we also fly, and without going into detail about what aircraft we use, what really stands out here is that we use aircraft that are that have short runway requirements, because in King George Island we don't have an airport, it's an airfield. So we need a plane that can take off and land without a very long runway. It's something that is flexible, and that we do. DAP Airways has, who are our partners, they've been doing that for over 20 years, and they have a lot of experience in Antarctic logistics. There you can see the branded Antarctic Airways Penguin, and the crew getting excited about what's about to come. All right, so we'll have to wrap this without going into questions, just with these last tips about planning and traveling to Antarctica. But rest assured that we will be sending the answers to those questions in the follow-up email. So Rafa, if we can try to.
I'll breeze through these. So
Exactly.
First of all, plan ahead. This is a short season, and these are two small ships. So though we mentioned a lot of departures, availability runs out fast, especially for these high demand dates. Also, we mentioned it before, consider some buffer in your travel plans. Patagonia is at the end of the world for pretty much anywhere in the world, even within South America. So being able to arrive a day before just gives you a lot of leeway in case you have any flight delays, any disruptions. It's a huge advantage to having a stress-free travel experience. Plus, if everything goes well and you arrive the day before without any delays, you get some rest after a very long flight for a very intense trip. Then the luggage weight limit for air cruises is 25 kilograms. We have to stick to it to keep an eye on the weight of that ship for landing in those conditions. So it's important to stay within those 25 kilograms. If you have any luggage that you're not going to be using in Antarctica that you're bringing, maybe because you're going to Easter Island or the Atacama Desert or wherever, you can leave that stuff at the Caballerones Hotel, and it'll be waiting for you upon your return. Then, this is probably the biggest trip anyone could take anywhere ever. So having comprehensive travel insurance goes a really long way. Having it cover a cancellation can be a huge weight off your back if you end up needing to cancel. And also having it cover a medical emergency evacuation can be a huge lifesaver in the very off chance that you end up having any type of accident. A flight back to civilization can cost a fortune, so travel insurance goes a long way. And visa requirements can also be key. There are some visa requirements to arrive into Chile, not so much Antarctica. So call the consulate and make sure that you have everything you need to be able to travel without a problem.
Exactly. So unfortunately, we ran out of time for questions. Like we said, we will include them in the follow-up email, as well as our early booking promotions that, as a general knowledge, it's $5,000 per person on suites and $2,500 per person on all other cabin categories on both ships, Classic Antarctica and Polar Circle itineraries.
It's for a limited amount of time only, so definitely it's a really, really good discount compared to what we usually do, so don't let that slip by. I really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be answering your questions in the follow-up email. Thank you for your time. It's been a long one, so I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, guys.